The small town of Millfield had always been a quiet and peaceful place. The people there were friendly and welcoming, and there was rarely any trouble to be found. But that all changed one fateful night, when a group of teenagers decided to play with something they shouldn't have. They had no idea what kind of evil they were about to unleash upon their town. It all started with a dare. 4 teenagers, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Mark, were hanging out at Emily's house, looking for something to do. They had already watched a movie and played some video games, but they were still bored. That's when Sarah came up with the idea. "I heard that if you light a candle and say the devil's name 3 times, he'll appear," she said. Jake rolled his eyes. "That's just an old wives' tale. There's no such thing as the devil." Emily, however, was intrigued. "It might be kind of fun," she said. "We could try it." Mark shrugged. "Why not? It's not like anything's going to happen." So they went into Emily's attic and found a candle. They lit it and sat in a circle around it. "Okay, so what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We just have to say the devil's name 3 times, Emily said. "That's it." They all looked at each other nervously. Then, slowly and hesitantly, they began to chant. "Lucifer, Lucifer, Lucifer." At first, nothing happened. They all laughed nervously, feeling silly for even trying. But then they heard a noise, a faint whisper that seemed to be coming from the candle itself. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Emily said, her eyes wide. "But let's keep going." So they continued to chant, their voices growing louder and more frantic. And then, suddenly, the candle went out. There was complete darkness in the attic, and they couldn't see a thing. "Guys, I'm scared," Sarah whimpered. "It's okay," Jake said, trying to sound brave. "We'll just light the candle again." But when they tried to relight the candle, they found that they couldn't. It was as if the flame had been snuffed out by some unseen force. And then they heard a voice, a deep and menacing voice that seemed to be coming from all around them. "You have summoned me," the voice said. "And now I am here." The teenagers screamed and huddled together in fear. They had no idea what they had just unleashed upon themselves. For the next few days, strange things began to happen in Millfield. Animals went missing, and there were reports of strange figures lurking in the shadows. And then, on the 5th night after they had summoned the devil, Emily went missing. Her parents reported her disappearance to the police, and a search party was organized. But despite their best efforts, they couldn't find any trace of her. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The remaining teenagers were terrified. They knew that they had unleashed something evil upon their town, and they had no idea how to stop it. And then, one night, they heard a knock at the door. When they opened it, they found a man standing on their doorstep. He was tall and thin, with a pale complexion and dark, piercing eyes. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I am here to help you," the man said. "I know what you have done, and I know how to stop it." The teenagers were skeptical, but they had no other choice. They let the man into their house. As soon as the man entered the house, the atmosphere changed. The air became cold and heavy, and the lights flickered. The man didn't seem bothered by any of this, however. He walked calmly into the living room and sat down. "I can help you, but you must do exactly as I say," he said. "Do you understand?" The teenagers nodded, too scared to speak. The man then began to instruct them on what they needed to do. They had to find the object that they had used to summon the devil and destroy it. But first, they had to lure the devil out of hiding. "He won't come out unless he thinks he has something to gain," the man explained. "You have to make a deal with him." The teenagers didn't want to make a deal with the devil, But they had no other choice. They agreed to do whatever the man said. Over the next few days, they made preparations. They gathered the materials they needed, and they scouted out a location where they could make their deal with the devil. The man guided them every step of the way, his calm and collected demeanor never wavering. Finally, the night arrived. The teenagers went to the designated location, carrying with them the object they had used to summon the devil. They set up a ritual circle and lit candles, just as they had done before. And then they waited. At first, nothing happened. The teenagers were nervous, wondering if the devil would show up at all. But then they heard a rustling in the bushes. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing. It was the devil. He looked different than they had expected. He was not a horned creature with a pitchfork, but rather a handsome man with dark, piercing eyes. He wore a suit that looked like it had been tailored specifically for him, and he exuded an air of confidence and power. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice smooth and seductive. "We want to make a deal," Jake said, his voice shaking. The devil smiled. "And what can you offer me?" The teenagers explained their plan. They would give him the object they had used to summon him, and in return, he would leave their town and never return. The devil considered this for a moment. "I accept your deal," he said. "But you must give me the object first." The teenagers hesitated. They didn't want to give the devil what he wanted, but they knew they had no other choice. They handed over the object, and the devil examined it carefully. "It's a shame," he said. "This could have been useful to me." And then he vanished into thin air. The teenagers breathed a sigh of relief. They had done it. They had defeated the devil. But as they were packing up their things, they heard a noise. It was a whisper, a faint voice that seemed to be coming from nowhere. "You think you have won, but you have only just begun," the voice said. "You have no idea what you have unleashed upon your town." The teenagers looked at each other in horror. They realized that they had made a terrible mistake. They had played with something they shouldn't have, and now they were going to pay the price. Over the next few weeks, the town of Millfield was plunged into darkness. Strange things began to happen. People disappeared, and buildings burned down. The sky was always dark, and the air was thick with the stench of sulfur. The teenagers tried to fight back. They tried to undo what they had done, but it was too late. The devil had taken hold of their town, and there was no escaping his grasp. In the end, the teenagers were consumed by the darkness that had taken over their town. They were never seen or heard from again. Some say that they were taken by the devil himself, while others believe that they were swallowed up by the same evil that they had unleashed. The town of Millfield became known as a place of horror and despair, a place where the devil himself had once roamed freely. And though the teenagers had tried to stop him, they had ultimately failed. The lesson, of course, was clear: you should never play with the devil. For when you do, you risk unleashing a darkness that can never be fully contained.